When I use the word space sim, one of the first games that might have popped up in your head is Elite Dangerous, which is synonymous with the genre, and for good reason. You know, this is a game that's certainly beloved amongst those who enjoy these types of experiences, and you can see on Steam right now that overall reviews are mostly positive, with the lifetime reviews sitting at 77% from 54, almost 55,000 users. But the game's reputation has taken a bit of a nosedive due to their recent expansion release that promised so much, yet delivered so little. I'm, of course, referring to the Odyssey expansion, which basically adds boots-on-the-ground gameplay for Elite Dangerous, whereas before it was basically strictly ship gameplay. They decided to implement boots-on-the-ground on planets and the like, allowing players to explore, but unfortunately the expansion has proven to be rather shallow in terms of content and also broken on a number of levels, and so you can see that reviews are mostly negative. They're sitting at 30% as of the publishing of this video with 3,500 reviews, and that number keeps getting lower and lower. And scrolling down, you can see some of the complaints. So one user is talking about how they're using 3440 by 1440p ultra-wide monitor with a 1080 Ti graphics card, which is a pretty substantial hardware. But even then, when engaging with the expansion's content, they're barely getting 30 frames per second, and there are infrequent drops down to 2 to 5 frames per second in some cases. And it doesn't matter whether the settings are on low or ultra, the frame rates are about the same, and the user accuses the game of being just an unoptimized mess. And indeed, if you're changing graphic settings and it's not making any difference and frame rates are still relatively low compared to what the expectation is, then yeah, that's a safe assumption to make. There are UI changes that many have said is awful in terms of usability, a lot of game-breaking glitches that plenty of people have pointed out. And one of the appeals of Elite Dangerous is that it's basically an MMO. It's very much at its core a multiplayer experience, but bad instancing means that you might have a friend on your friends list who you want to play with and meet up with, but when both of you dive into the game, you will find that even if you're at the exact same location, you cannot see the other player because the game just failed at recognizing the intent of those players. And this is not an issue that's unique to this expansion, but it's especially bad for this expansion when you're talking about boots-on-the-ground gameplay that people would want to join up to do together. And just scrolling down across the board, you can see that reviews are largely negative. Here's another one that does talk about some of the good stuff, but in terms of gameplay, the gunplay unfortunately is hampered by this rock, paper, scissors, rocket launcher formula that has you changing weapons constantly, switching weapons constantly just to take out a handful of enemies. So the feedback this user provided was, would be nice if there was more balance so that I wouldn't need to switch between weapons to get maximum damage. That just ruins the experience, and this isn't the only user who's reported that. I've seen plenty of posts that have echoed similar sentiments. Dying in battle makes the game incredibly tedious because of how it works. It just takes a very long time to get back into the fray. If you want to get back, you have to order a taxi from the nearest station. A lack of goals that surrounds this whole experience, and capital gains are minimum. This is probably the thing that's really turning people off. Even if all of the expansion systems and mechanics worked, unfortunately, this pool, this ocean, is incredibly shallow. There's just nothing to do with the boots-on-the-ground gameplay. You've got the exoskeleton of the mechanics that are still very rough, but in terms of the content, what you do with those mechanics, it's all unfortunately very lackluster, involving basically looking at plans for explorers, and then for combat gameplay, you've basically got the same mission type, just kind of recycled, that you're repeating over and over again, and the rewards you get from this stuff, unfortunately, don't justify you spending a whole lot of time with gameplay that's broken and mission objectives that are incredibly bland and lacking in substance. And I also refreshed the Steam reviews to see if new reviews would pop up, and indeed you've got plenty more people just discussing the game's myriad flaws. Here's one review that goes into a lot of detail, echoing many of the same sentiments while bullet listing in more detail, and the first bullet point talks about just how unstable the game is, not just in terms of frame rate, but disconnects. Those are far too frequent. There are bugs like falling through the floor of a settlement building that basically kills you right there and then, enemies spawning with no warning whatsoever, players' weapons being too weak to engage hostile units. Enemies are unfortunately bullet sponges, which is what makes the weapon switching and the rock, paper, scissor, rocket launcher formula that much more of a pain in the ass to deal with. 8-hour missions to systems 22,000 light years away. For the amount of distance that they want you to travel and the amount of time that it takes to sink into this stuff for very little substance in terms of activities and objectives, the rewards you get just aren't worth the amount of time you'd spend on this stuff. Then there's mention of a glitch when you die that basically costs you 30 minutes of gameplay time for no reason because of where you get spawned and stuff like that. There are no contingencies for when you disconnect in the middle of a settlement mission, so you'll respawn in the middle of the settlement with the entire mission reset and 40 AI ready to kill you. I'm frankly offended at the state of this expansion. This seems to be something that plenty of people are saying. Keep in mind that this expansion is $40. At $40, you shouldn't be getting an experience that is woefully unfinished and feels like it isn't even ready for early access. Soon enough, word began to spread and major media outlets began covering this. So this is an article from PC Gamer whose headline reads, "Players in uproar over Elite Dangerous Odyssey's bugs and poor performance." Here's a Eurogamer article whose headline reads, "Unhappy players review bomb Elite Dangerous Odyssey." IGN did a story on this. You name it, it's kind of spread far and wide at this stage. On Reddit, you'll find plenty of memes and disappointed community members, and here you'll actually find more visual examples of the new expansion's issues. So right here we have screenshots of the planetary tech at display for Elite Dangerous. Horizons was the last expansion, and you can see that it looked pretty impressive, and then the Odyssey Alpha showcased this stuff, and you can see just how much more lush planets look, and then we have the actual full release of Odyssey, the final product, whose planetary generation looks barren and generic, bland, and even just zooming out and looking at planets from outer space, they just don't look very good, and in some cases look worse than before the expansion launched. So here we have one user who spotlighted why some of these planets look so bad, and this individual noticed that the topography and the way that's generated basically takes one pattern and copies and pastes them throughout the planet at different angles and different size. The headline of this thread aptly points out that the human brain is excellent at pattern recognition. That's why the new planet tech is failing so hard. And this is one of the more subtle examples. Another Reddit user posted an image that looks like this. This kind of dragon-looking pattern, just copied and pasted all over, and the angles are basically the same in this bottom half, so the pattern is extremely noticeable. It obviously breaks the illusion that these were naturally formed planets. They give these planets a very artificial look. Beyond performance, there are graphical issues like this individual who had graphics loaded in like this. Basically looks like an N64 game. When this Reddit user was asked by someone else how they managed to get these results, the response provided was pretty simple. Just let it update and clicked play via Steam. So it wasn't some intentional thing that they did, this was just how the game booted up. We're also seeing strange issues like what is showcased in this video. If we fast forward, you'll see that as the player tries to climb up the stairs, not only does it not work, but this weird thing happens. And so just across the board, oh, and yeah, they fell through the floor and then back up. Here we have somebody spotlighting just how imbalanced the economy is, not only because the activities you partake in with this expansion reward so little, but also because of the cost of weapons. I think the station store owners are ripping us off. 1 ton of guns costs way less than 1 rifle in the store. In this game, trying to get new weapons and trying to upgrade your weapons on the most basic capacity can be such a huge money and time sink that it just feels incredibly stingy. Here's another example of how the planet tech for the game has gotten worse after installing Odyssey. So this is what it looked like on Horizons. You can see that the lighting looks more appropriate and the colors look fine and everything just blends well with the outer space environment. But then look at Odyssey. You can see just how overblown this image is and how overblown the planet itself is. It just looks way out of place and it sticks out like a sore thumb. It looks nowhere near as natural as it once used to. And honestly, I could just go on and on and on, but I think you get the idea at this point. Odyssey is as broken as game releases or expansion releases can get, as unfinished as they can get. Many agree that this is the prototype of what Odyssey should turn out to be. Calling it alpha or beta might be too generous given the state of Odyssey. Now, as word spread about all of this and as community backlash grew, the developers did respond. Specifically, Elite Dangerous's director apologized for the host of issues that people have been experiencing with the new expansion. This is Frontier Development CEO and founder David Vrba, who posted an apology that you can see right here in the Frontier forums. And here's what the CEO had to say. Greetings, Commanders. With our first hotfix now released and another one arriving very shortly, I wanted to take a moment to address the wider community feedback and reports regarding performance issues, server outages, and bug reports within Elite Dangerous Odyssey. First and foremost, I'd like to apologize wholeheartedly to those who have been suffering from these problems. I would like to reassure you that we take these issues very seriously and that they are our top priority and focus. I've got to say, it's hard to perceive statements like, we assure you that we take these issues very seriously, as sincere when the development studio didn't take preventative measures by delaying a product that clearly wasn't finished, that was clearly far too technically broken for it to be deemed a final release. If you took these issues seriously, you would not have shipped the game in such a state. And it's not as if we're talking about minor issues here. The game is so broken and so clearly unfinished that there's no way the developers and the heads of this development studio and this company didn't know about the issues. It seems very clear to me that they very intentionally released this expansion knowing that it's not in a state that makes it worth the $40 asking price, and certainly isn't worth the wait for fans who have been anticipating this boots-on-the-ground gameplay, only to be disappointed by just how many issues there are and just how little substance the expansion has to it. People didn't purchase a prototype. They purchased a final product, but what they got instead was very much basically an early prototype. Our second hotfix will be released very soon, which we hope will address more of the reported bugs and bring further stability improvements into the game. We'll continue to work on updates which will resolve more bugs and improve stability further. Based on past broken releases, and given that the state of Odyssey is worse than some of those really awful releases that we've seen in the past, it seems unlikely that a few hot fixes will actually fix the game. We're looking at months, maybe years down the line for Odyssey to feel like a truly substantial expansion release, and even if bugs are mitigated and stability improved, it doesn't change the fact that there's a lack of substantial content, a lack of mission variety, a lack of just things to do with this gameplay foundation that they've set up for Elite Dangerous. And as long as that continues to be the case, even if this expansion runs smoothly, it still very much just feels like an exoskeleton. Some of our players are reporting poor performance on machines where we would expect the performance to be good, and others are saying it is fine. We're trying to get to the bottom of this. I've been playing on my old home machine from 2014, which has an Intel i7 Extreme CPU and a GTX 980 GPU, 16 gigs of RAM, playing at 1080p full screen at Ultra. I was doing this so I could have a good feel for how the game was playing on older hardware, and I used the same machine during Alpha. I've also been playing on a high-spec 2021 dev machine. From what I've seen, performance results have definitely been inconsistent across a wide array of PC specs, whether it's high-end or low-end or mid-tier. Across all three categories, I have seen both people who haven't been having some of the more severe performance issues and those who are experiencing performance issues. I've seen folks who own 3090s seeing frame rates that are below 30 FPS in sections where nothing super graphically intensive is happening. So while the CEO may have seen good enough results with the different machines that the expansion was tested in, it's clear that not enough testing was done, as reports of performance issues are widespread enough. The apology concludes with, "I'd like to thank you all for your patience and support. The Elite Dangerous community has always been at the heart of the game. We understand that there are a number of players who have had problems accessing and playing the game, and I can assure you that we are focusing fully on improving this for those affected and communicating with you openly and regularly about how these issues are being addressed. Thank you all, David." And while the community does appreciate that David is communicating directly about these issues, acknowledging them, and striving to fix them, the fact still remains that we're looking at yet another scenario where a game product was released far before it was ready, and was likely done so with developers and leadership knowing full well the state of the game, but still deciding to take that risk and gambling with people's satisfaction and taking their money, even if it's very clear that it's not very likely that most people will be satisfied with the quality of this expansion release. This is a damn shame, really. I mean, Elite Dangerous is such an expansive space sim, and the addition of boots on the ground and exploration of planets, I mean, that sounded incredible. Like it could really just take this game to a whole new level, only for excited customers who have been waiting a while for this to discover that Odyssey right now is basically a whole lot of nothing. It is in many ways detrimental to the game. A lot of people feel swindled, and rightfully so. This is not what was advertised in marketing. This isn't what was promised. And anytime a game releases finished at a certain price point, the expectation is that it'll be at a certain quality bar technically, and that there will be a certain amount of content, substantial content, to be able to partake in. Odyssey is woefully lacking in both. But that's just one man's take on this situation. Let me know in the comments below what your experience has been like with Elite Dangerous Odyssey, or let me know in the comments below what your take is on all of the feedback surrounding this new expansion. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.